Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and respected professional and an author with a deep understanding of leadership from Boston, USA, Robert Glazer. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Robert is an author of a book titled The Compass Within. He is the founder and chairman of Acceleration Partners. He's also an author of 7 additional books, including Elevate, Friday Forward, Elevate Your Team, and How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace. So, Robert, we're going to speak today about your book, The Compass Within. But before we come to your book, a few questions for you. Looking back at your career, what were the key turning points that led you to become such a strong advocate for value-driven leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a point that I talk about at the end of the book where I went to a global leadership program. I think it was in 2013, just as my company was growing and I was needing to manage people. And I thought it was going to be all about these tactics and how we manage other people and these tools. And the first couple of days was kind of a big mirror, like, who are you and what do you value? And I realized actually that I was very values driven, and that event gave me that. That event did not give us is to help us figure out what those values were, just that they were important. And so I kind of went on a journey to figure that out. And when I figured that out, everything about my life and leadership and company changed, because I think that is the foundation of authentic leadership. And then we started teaching that curriculum to our up and coming leaders in classes, and we saw how it really helped them lead. And so people started, I wrote Elevate, and I talked about spiritual capacity, understanding values, and people started saying to me, okay, well, how do I do that? And I was like, well, I have this curriculum. I don't have an easy answer for you. So I built a course. Thousands of people took the course. They're incredible results. I know a lot of people don't go in a course. So I ended up writing the book to sort of teach through characters, the content of the course.
Fascinating. And can you share any personal challenges you faced while growing your business and how your core values helped guide you through some of those tough moments?
Yeah, look, you run into a lot of decisions on that aren't right or wrong, but how you want to build a business. And when you're growing fast, you break a lot of things, processes and people. And one of the things that so one of my core values is respectful authenticity, and that does. We were building this great culture, and in the US, the way people leave is this kind of 2 weeks notice thing. And for me, I was like, this just doesn't feel good or right, or doesn't make sense for the type of culture we wanted to build. So we tried to think of something new, and eventually that became my TED Talk on rethinking 2 weeks notice in the book. And we tried to say, look, talk to us. Like, it's fine if you want to leave. We'll do a transition program. So I just really like sitting down and thinking about like how I wanted to grow a business and what would be different from sort of business as usual. And that was usually a directly dotted line to something that I valued personally.
Thank you. And how did your time as the CEO of your marketing agency influence the way you think about culture and leadership today?
Well, that was all my laboratory, right? And I look, there are a lot of different rubrics. My next book in a few years will actually be about looking at parenting through a leadership lens, because it seems very strange to me that parenting is going in a different direction than what we generally understand is good leadership. But I think they both have the same answer, which is, can you build a culture that has high standards and expectation,
Correct.
but high support and builds people up and tries to get everyone, as I always say, if it's like a high jump, you raise the bar, and then you coach and work with everyone to have their highest jump, ever. So that sort of became the basis. Look, I'm a high expectation person, but I would love for everyone to clear the bar. And if they're willing to do the work, like, I'll work with them and train them and coach them to clear the bar.
Fascinating. Great response. Thank you. So now let's talk about your book, The Compass Within. Tell me about your book. What led you to write it? And what was the hypothesis when you started to think about your book?
Yeah, well, continuing on what I said before, so I got asked a lot about this, and I'd say you could take my course, but
Hmm.
a lot of people don't do courses. And I was like, all right, I need to turn this into a book. But I kept envisioning going to a bookstore and seeing this book on values or core values and being like, I would never walk by and pick that up because a lot of people think that core values are abstract. It's one of these things that's kind of talked about, and really, my formula in the book is very different. I'm just as skeptical, and it's about actionable. So I actually am a big fan of Patrick Lencioni. I love parables. My daughter one day was sort of, I always challenge her to do something she hasn't done. And she said, you should write a fiction book. All you do is read nonfiction and write nonfiction. And I sort of connected the dots for me. And I was like, I wonder it would be better if I showed these principles through
Mm.
characters, which would
Yeah.
give everyone and kind of make it a story that people would want to read.
Mm.
I'd never written fiction. It seemed fun. In some ways, it's easier. In some ways, it's harder. You don't need as much of the structure. You just need to start writing. But man, like tracking character development, I'd be like, wait, who was that character? And what did I say they did? And when was 6 months ago? But as people have read the book and Jamie is the protagonist, I've heard a lot of people say, Jamie's story is just kind of a mirror for people to see themselves, like a
Mm.
relationship issue they had, a job issue they had, a community. He's sort of a vehicle, and while I explain the entire thing in the chapter after the story, it's a quick story, and I think it actually shows people values in a way that they can relate to, and like, oh yeah, I've had that experience, and okay, now I want to understand like how could I have decided that differently, and what would have helped me.
Fascinating. And, writing fiction is very, very different. I mean, I have two fiction books and eight books which are nonfiction, but it needs a completely new mindset, but very valuable. But coming back to the next question for you, why are personal core values often overlooked or misunderstood? And why is it so important for people to connect with their values?
Well, so actionable core value. I think actionable core values are fun, and core values are the ultimate decision making rubric. So
Hmm.
if you want to make decisions that you're going to feel good about, and in the book I talk about the big three, which is your partner, your vocation, and your community. Those kind of really need to be aligned, and I think a lot of us inherently know there's a values problem when it's crossed.
Hmm.
That's kind of like hitting the electric fence and knowing that it hurts. Like the goal is to know where that fence is and stay away from it and the
Yeah.
sign. So I think a
Hmm.
lot of people navigate core values by sort of running into the electric fence. What I'm talking about is like, look, let's identify the lanes. Let's say here are the things I should do and not do because inherently it's going to want to make me kind of happy and very dissatisfied, and try to stay within those things and be able to make decisions that I can support. Too many people hear like family and integrity and one word core values. Those worded like that, they don't help you make a decision. And I don't think those are good core values. The
Hmm.
process in the book gets people to ones that sound more like respectful authenticity or include all perspectives or whatever it takes or go one more or things that
Hmm.
are much more unique and specific to their
Hmm.
behavior.
Hmm. Well said. Staying with core values, my next question. You highlight that core values can impact life satisfaction and engagement at work. Could you help me understand the science behind this comment that you make and give me an example if you can?
Sure. Yeah. Look, as I said, a lot of people consider this a little bit abstract, and there's a lot more data that would say it was not. So, nearly half of employees I know in the US and the UK say they're consider leaving their company because it doesn't exemplify their values.
Hmm.
Gallup basically did a study saying that when employees see alignment between their personal values and the company, they're 50% more engaged. Interestingly, the National Association of Health in the U.S., determined that people who know and live by their values are 30% higher life satisfaction. That's probably on par with some blockbuster pharmaceuticals that are out there. And
Hmm.
and for a leader organization, people who see the leaders communicate their values, and there's a big and here, and
Hmm.
then follow through with them, there's three times more trust according to a study. And so I don't know a lot of organizations that couldn't benefit from, if you said I can bring in a consultant and we could triple the trust and raise engagement 50% and make people happier. So there's a lot more data around this. People are looking for meaning. They're looking to find their tribe and connection. And obviously they want to do that through their relationships and their community, but also their vocation.
Amazing. Can you also explain the big three life decisions and why aligning with values is so important in making these three decisions?
Yeah, so the book follows the character through the big three. And obviously, we want to make good decisions everywhere. But the big three is either your chosen vocation or the place you work. Sometimes it's what you do and sometimes it's where you do it. There's your partner, obviously, and then there's your community, the communities that you choose to live and work in. And I would argue strongly that without core values alignment, those have very little chance of long-term success. I think you can have different activities than your partner, you can have different personalities, but when you're coming together as a family unit and even with your kids and you're trying to make big decisions for the family, you want to be on the same page, right?
Yeah.
And you can have small points of conflict on one, but if these are my core values and my partner, imagine like an opposite magnet is the opposite of all of those. So I'm a long-term orientation and they're a live for today. And, I'm a include all perspectives and they're at it, go at it yourself. Like that is going to be really hard. That is going to be like and I don't think people, when they think about compatibility and most of the people I know who are married at the surface, they're very opposites attract, right? But I think the marriages and the relationships that last, there's a deeper connection on the value. I think people look at compatibility and they look at the surface stuff. It really doesn't matter if you both play tennis and love to read and whatever. If you don't agree on any of the how you want to raise your kids and if you want kids and what you want their values to be, like that's where I think people run into trouble.
Very well said. I agree with you completely. Robert, my next question, how can someone identify when they are out of alignment with their core values and what should they do about it?
Yeah, look, out of alignment, it just doesn't feel good. It feels hard and wrong and like you want to fight it. The first step to getting in alignment is actually figuring out what they are. If you don't know where those signposts are, you don't know how to stay away from the fence. And obviously there's a detailed process in the book, but it really starts with, I've come up with 6 questions that I think if people sit down and answer, it starts the process of understanding your values. And this pushes for positive things and negative things. And I can give you 1 or 2 of them. People always are trying to write down the list. So I just put it it's Robert Glazer.6. And you can see the 6 questions and you can watch me filling them out as an example. But, one of the questions might be, when in your life, did you feel really disengaged and didn't like the work and but what was going on? What were you being asked to do? Another one is, what would you want people to say about you, at the eulogy, kind of if they showed up to your funeral, or what advice, what do people constantly come to you for advice, and help and others? And so when people answer these questions, and I've seen people post it online and it's cool and they sit down in a coffee shop, and I think they're not like totally surprised at what comes out, but the patterns illuminate across these lists and they're like, oh, respect came up in like all of these. Like I didn't realize like how important respect is to me, or I didn't realize how important it is to like listen to people, right? Because I was frustrated when people weren't listening to people. People come to me when they want someone that could listen. And so the whole process is in there in the book, but that starts it. And so I think like that's a great place to start and then see, do I want to dig in a little bit more here?
Well said. How can individuals begin their own values discovery journey? And what are some common mistakes they should try and avoid?
Yeah, so those 6 questions that I think is the best place to start. The mistake is a lot of times, and this gets into something I have called the core validator in the process. People, when I talk about the need to word it, they kind of worry about the cart before the horse, like getting the perfect wording on something that may not be a value. So part of that validator is to say, look, figure out the theme first. Is it the right theme? And one of the tests of the theme is,
Mm,
and everyone always finds this to be the most true, right? Because a value doesn't feel good when it's broken. So if you want to test whether something's a value or like a nice to have, picture the opposite. Picture
right.
someone who embodies the opposite, lives you meet them at a party and they spew, so your value is gratitude, and you meet them at a party and they are just like, the world owes me this, the world owes me this, I didn't get my trust fund, and when I describe this
Mm,
anecdote person to someone, if I knew one of your values, I describe it, I can see in your face before you even answer whether
mm,
like that we're on the right track. There is
mm,
a visceral and physical reaction to I do not like that.
agree,
So
agree.
that's how you know you have the right theme, and
Yep.
then you can run the sort of core validator process to work on wording that helps make it actionable for you.
Very interesting. You also talk about values like family and integrity often being ineffective. Why is that, and how can leaders identify more powerful core values?
Yeah, as I said, the one word values just don't cut it. And because let's look at integrity. I have heard 10 different definitions of
Correct.
integrity. There's a lot of different cultural stuff, right? Where you live, there may be a very different definition of integrity where I
Correct.
live. And
Yeah.
so if I run a, global company, like how does that work? And then family, like I don't know how family helps you with a decision in the workplace. What I find is that the value lives, if you ask a few more questions, the value lives a level or two below that. So if I
Mm,
said, what does integrity mean to you?
mm,
Someone might talk about keeping your word. Another person might talk about telling the truth. Another person might talk about, living their purpose. And that's the value that carries over. Similarly, I say to, okay, family, tell me,
mm,
what is it? What is it about family? Because family is a priority for a lot of people.
correct.
But if it's always been with you, I don't think it's a value. And so someone may describe, oh, family is a trusting unit for me.
Mm,
Like, okay, so you need small groups of people you can trust. Well, now that probably mimics your management style or otherwise. For some people, means family means you just keep showing up,
yeah.
right? And oh, well, I can then apply that to your work and your friendships or otherwise. So the problem is, again, family doesn't really get to the importance of why family is important. And
Mm,
five people who tell me family is a value will answer that next question very differently.
very interesting. And how do you see the role of core values in building long-term trust and loyalty in a company's culture?
Yeah, look, the, the goal for me of a company, ideally, is not to be everything to everyone.
Mm,
It is to where the thoughts, to paraphrase, Gandhi a little bit, this is where the thoughts and the words and the actions are all aligned. So
mm,
the things that we believe are the things that we're saying and the things that we're doing. Inherently, that will not appeal to everyone.
mm,
So I think the great leaders and the great companies are pretty comfortable saying like, this is our 2%. And we want to find the people that are aligned to our 2%, right?
mm,
There are some environments for which include all perspectives is a really, important, would be a great aligned value. There's other
right.
types of businesses, a hedge fund trading business, which is not. Like what you need there is confidence and independent decision
Mm,
making and people who want to go at it alone and put
yeah.
their neck out.
Yeah.
So much like universities, I always say like a university or just in the US have entirely different value propositions.
Mm,
A large city urban school and a rural, liberal arts school are appealing to totally different kids.
yeah.
I think more companies could benefit from doing that and to stop trying to be everyone to anything,
Mm,
everything to everyone. Say, look, this is
yeah.
what we value, and this is why you'd like it here, and this is why you
Mm,
wouldn't like it here.
amazing. Yep, I agree. And my next question, what impact do you think core values have on decision making, and how can they improve business outcomes?
To me, it's the ultimate rubric. And I mean, I'll go back to a personal decision. So
Mm,
just that I said, so let's say we did that family question and someone said, it's about showing up and being there. That's what
mm,
family means to me. They find out that in the middle of a pretty big business time and they're running around like crazy, that their friend's father has died, right? And they're like, should I drop everything and go to the funeral? Well, if they consult themselves about how their core value is just showing up and being there, they should, because they're very much likely to regret that.
Correct.
And I also recently have written about some business decisions from U.S. leaders in which their personal core values led them to decide something that in the short term looked like it was not a good thing for the business, but in the long term ended up being a great thing. And that's the little secret that no one likes to tell you.
Correct.
Core values cost you stuff. They cost you in the short term because it's always easier to do what everyone else is doing. I say, you don't get any credit when your core values and the boat are both going down the stream in the same direction. You get credit when you point your boat uphill, and it's hard to do it, and it costs you something, and you're willing to kind of suffer that in the short term.
Amazing. Well said. I have time for two more questions for you.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who might think that focusing on values is just a soft skill rather than a business imperative?
Yeah, well, I would say that the data doesn't show that, right? And particularly workers today, they want to know what people stand for. But to our early discussion, it doesn't mean they all stand for the same thing, and people are looking for different things. So if you want people to make better, look, you make a lot of decisions in business. And if you want people to make confident decisions that they can stand by, I think this awareness makes them feel really good about those decisions. And again, the decisions that stand the test of time, that don't look good, in the moment.
My last question for you, Robert. How does your book, The Compass Within, provide our viewers a framework for aligning their values with their work, relationships, and their community?
Yeah, so if you read the book or you go answer the 6 questions and you do that work and you haven't done it before and you start to have those themes, I think like the character in the book, you can look across your life, whether it's, relationship, the job, the vocation, the community, and start to maybe understand why some things are frustrating you and don't feel right, or maybe have some new appreciation where there's some stuff going on at the surface, or it's a difficult time now, but man, this really is in alignment. So I just don't see how people, if you're looking to make better decisions in life and confident decisions, can't benefit from more clarity around this.
Fascinating. And on that note, Robert, I just want to say thank you for this absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you for talking to me about your book, The Compass Within. You covered some very interesting ground on values, core values, and how these values are so critical for ourselves, for our families, for the work that we do, for the companies that we work in, and for the communities that we live in. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.